is here. I have to say, I always think that I'm on fire. You're incredible. And there's a problem with the phones. You know,
I heard.
We'll mend that. So keep those calls coming. There is a problem at the moment, but we will get to it. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number for Kev, of course. Keep the text coming to him as well. 8722. Start your message with the word talk. Have a fantastic... I've got to go and make a television show tomorrow.
Good.
So I'm not going to be here. Russell Quirk.
I know he is.
This is from a man who used to write a column where he called me Jeremy Vile. We're now best mates.
I stand by that.
Honestly, and I stand by the fact that shirt's crap. Have a great week. See you on Monday for more Drive. Going home. Ta-ra!
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
There you are. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Action Station Talk. It is Action Stations tonight. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan and I'll be steering you through 3 full-throttle hours of news, views and dazzling debate. You know the drill. Get involved. Get it off your chest. Get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000. Or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number and I promise to play your message out. Here's what's coming up. Keir's cover-up, the scandal of Southport continues apace. Starmer, the cops, the CPS and the authorities all droning on about the nonsense of prejudicing killer Axel Rubider-Cabana's trial when it's pretty clear that this bunch of woke warriors were just terrified of labelling a young man of colour, the son of Rwandan immigrants, a terrorist. Scared to call a terrorist a terrorist. Merseyside police still say no terrorism. What planet are they on? 0344 499 1000. While the Prime Minister and his motley cabinet crew were busy slamming far-right rioters for spreading misinformation about terrorism, it was them spreading the misinformation that there was no terrorist connection. There was, as Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner so eloquently put it at the time. Any suggestion of terrorism is fake news. Really, Ange? Well, meanwhile, this gormless government is now blathering on about the horror of Ruda Cabana buying a knife on Amazon. OK, not great. But as in every kitchen, his mother's cutlery drawer was full of about 50 murder weapons. Banning online knife sales doesn't cut to the heart of the matter, does it? 0344 499 1000, plus the woke Washington bishop who didn't get the memo, and the Louisiana senator who took one look at two-tier Kia's baffling bid to offload the strategic Chagos Islands to China's friend Mauritius, and advised Britain's ludicrous leader to to lay off the ketamine and get that bong out of his mouth. At last, a plausible explanation for Starmer's bizarre policies. 0344 499 1000. Also tonight, Trump's common sense energy revolution in America exposes the madness of crazy Ed Miliband's net zero lunacy. Net zero is unstoppable, says Ed. But Ed, Donald just stopped it. And about time too. 0344 499 1000. Plus, how Giorgia Meloni is solving Italy's migrant crisis without any garbage about smashing the gangs. Police refusing to record the ethnicity of criminals over fears they'll be accused of racism. That rings a bell, doesn't it? Haven't you had enough of this crap? More insanity as the NHS advertises for yet another head of diversity for a bumper annual salary of £80,000. You could get about 3 nurses for that. And finally, the scandal of the Fat Cat charity boss who earns, wait for it, £5 million a year. He works for a charity. A lot of other charity bosses are getting more than £400,000. The soaring salaries of the people getting fat and wealthy on your donations is a living scandal. Your donations straight into these people's bulging pockets. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. All that and so much more. So don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now, at the home of free speech and common sense talk. Let's spend Wednesday night together. And it's always good on a Wednesday because for the first hour, and we do it on Thursdays as well, so these are great couple of days in the middle of the week. I'm joined by Talk International, it says Talk International editor Isabel Oakeshott. So anyway, you get the gist. Welcome to the show, Isabel.
Thanks. Where are we kicking off tonight, then?
Well, so much to cover. You just alerted me to that Louisiana senator who just told Keir Starmer to stop taking ketamine and get the bong out of his mouth. As I said earlier, I think at last there's some kind of explanation for some of his policies, but we'll talk about that later. Let's now talk about the very serious matter of what, without a shadow of a doubt, this country is being subjected to a cover-up. A cover-up by Keir Starmer. This nonsense, you're a journalist, a very fine journalist too. You know, I've been doing this for a long, long time. We know about journalistic law. You know, there are two aspects to this. You cannot prejudice a trial by naming the charges. That's ridiculous.
Of course you can't. That's like a basic thing. It's a matter of fact, isn't it? The truth is they just did not know how to handle this horror. I mean, the horror was bad enough in itself. If it had just been someone less complex, if I can put it that way, someone with a less complex family background, this would still have been an absolute nightmare for any government to deal with, leading to, rightly so, all manner of soul searching. But there were so many problems attached to this case. You know, the family's background, the Rwandan genocide, this, that, and the other. The fact that truthfully, the authorities knew that he'd been referred to the PREVENT program. You know, so many landmines politically that they basically just decided to shut it all down.
Yeah.
And it was wrong. And it did fan the flames, I think, because in that vacuum of information, people came to their own conclusions. And in many cases, they made the wrong assumptions. I'm so glad that you're showing yet again the real picture of Axel Rudikabana genuinely looking like the devil. But the government didn't want us to see him looking like the devil. They wanted us to think that this was a cute little schoolboy who was a Welsh man. Well, was he?
What was that about? I mean, they released a picture of him as an angelic 12-year-old schoolboy. What were they thinking? They wanted us to think better of this person? Because, you see, the thing is, angelic 12-year-old picture or not, I kind of look down on people, I don't think well of people, who murder 3 little schoolgirls. They were trying to make this kid look better. Unbelievable. And here's what they should have done, right? You'll understand this. Now, on day one, Keir Starmer, the CPS and the police, they knew that ricin poison and an Al-Qaeda manual, training manual, written, by the way, by an Islamic extremist. So there's no question of no connection to terrorism, all found in his house, right? So here's what they should have done. They should have charged him on day 1 or day 2, whenever they felt they were ready to charge, with the murder of 3 children, the attempted murder of 10 other people, including 8 more children, and the possession of ricin and the possession of an Al-Qaeda manual, all at once. All at once. Keir Starmer seems to be saying that if, for example, and not that you'd ever break the law, Isabel, but if, for example, you're nicked for, I don't know, stealing something, and later on you get charged with some terrorist offence, that all other offences to your name will be prejudiced by the word terrorist. So what are we going to do then when we arrest someone for a terrorist-related offence? Does that mean that their trial is immediately prejudiced because of the word terrorism? Now, what I'm getting at here, Isabel, is everything this idiot Prime Minister is saying doesn't make any sense at all. It has no logical cohesion to it whatsoever. It is absolute nonsense. He's gaslighting us. He didn't want to bring in terrorism because he was busy telling those far-right rioters that it was outrageous that they were spreading misinformation about terrorism. They weren't. They were actually on the money. It was him and the cops and the CPS spreading misinformation, saying there was no connection to terrorism. The Deputy Prime Minister at the time, Angela Rayner, actually said any suggestion of terrorism is fake news. They were lying to us.
They were, and it's outrageous. And the shutting down of political debate on legitimate aspects of this was also outrageous. And I think that there's going to be a lot of fallout still to come on that. I know a lot of MPs still have very, very hard questions to ask, and they're seeking parliamentary time to do so. This is what weak leaders and weak governments always do, ministers, when they're on the back foot. They try to rely on one of 2 things. Either A, I can't say anything because there's a legal process or B, I can't say anything because I've ordered a completely pointless investigation of my own that will take months or years, and I don't want to, it would be wrong to interfere with the due process of my own commissioned investigation. It's just a way of trying to shut everything down in order to try to regain control of events and of the narrative. And, I look back at that summer of hell in the UK, those awful riots, the violence we saw, the imprisoning of people who are still serving their sentences, by the way, for foolish tweets that may certainly have been upsetting and were improper, but didn't actually demonstrably cause anyone any physical harm in any of the cases that I'm aware of. I look back at that with sheer horror, actually. It's said about the government that the people of our country, a minority of them, had just elected, and that we're now saddled with probably for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and let's just stress that again. It wasn't the rioters who were spreading misinformation. They were saying, we think there's a terrorist connection here. They also said they thought it was a migrant. That was kind of wrong, although he was the son of migrants. But the Prime Minister knocked them down time and time again, and so did the entire government, far right, spreading misinformation. He was saying that when he absolutely knew there was a terrorist connection that he admitted only 2 days ago, finally, in that press conference, when he said, yes, terrorism was involved. Meanwhile, the Merseyside police, I mean, what's going on inside their heads? They still say there is no terrorist connection. This is a bunch of woke idiots, this sort of nonsense that we've got to get rid of. Middle-class people full of angst, terrified of being accused of racism or Islamophobia, just terrified to confront the truth. This guy was, in all probability, is certainly a terrorist, in all probability an Islamic terrorist. There are some reports that during that 12 minutes of horror in the dance hall, he was shouting Allahu Akbar. But the Merseyside police, Isabel, still saying no terrorist connection. What planet are they on?
The reason they say that is, I've looked into this quite carefully. Under the letter of the law, and this is why Keir Starmer yesterday said that the law will have to be changed, one of the very few semi-good things that he said, you can only charge for terror if there is a, quote, clear ideology. And what the police were unable to find was some kind of unifying ideology that underpinned this nutter's actions. On the Islamic angle to it, I personally think that it's not substantiated, or we don't know enough about
it is to an extent, Isabel, insofar as the Al-Qaeda training manual that Ruda Cabana had in his house was written by a renowned Islamic extremist.
Understood, but that should not have been allowed to kind of spill over into a broader anti-Muslim thing, which some people did go down that line. We know they did, and I think that was wrong. I think for me, the more interesting question is actually a broader one about immigration. And I completely acknowledge that this was not an immigrant, still less an illegal immigrant, but his parents had been accepted here as asylum seekers from a horrific genocide. And many will say, well, that's good. Britain should take people from horrific genocides. But there is a reality here that some of the people we're allowing in are very traumatized. They have had horrific backgrounds, and they come from places where, as I think Mike Graham was saying yesterday, either on your show or on one of our other shows, where frankly, they've seen people chopping up bodies. They've seen people chopping hands off and shooting and maiming. And I'm not in the slightest saying that that's normal, but we are allowing people in with a whole set of problems and different backgrounds to our own. And my God, we're paying the price.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to stress this once again. When you can't take one case. Keir Starmer is basically saying if the public know what the charges against a defendant are, that could prejudice that defendant's trial. Think about that. If the public know what the charges are, that could prejudice the defendant's trial. That is arrant nonsense, and he knows it. He's a lawyer, so he isn't misunderstanding the law. He's a lawyer. He knows what the law is. So what he's actually doing to us is lying to us. He's a liar. He is lying to us. It's outrageous.
Well, he's a weak leader. He doesn't have the courage to tell it as it is. And I'm sure he looks back on the way all that was handled, and in his heart of hearts, he must know that he spectacularly screwed it up. Unless, of course, he's like his own colleagues in being utterly delusional. And I'm afraid sometimes I think that's what they are. You know, you've got Rachel Reeves still talking about going for growth when the exact opposite is happening, and how she's going to fight with every fibre of her body for that, sounding as everything's okay just as the economy goes on the skids. You know, these people are delusional. They don't get it, and they're too proud to admit when it all went wrong. And, you know, I'm still reflecting on that speech that Keir Starmer gave yesterday, in which he vowed to do everything in his power to protect the children of this country. And yet he allows the boats to keep on coming. And yet he allows foreign criminals not to be deported. You know, this isn't how any well-run, safe country operates.
He's hopeless. And while he goes on about the welfare of children being so important to him, you know, I'll give him some credence. You know, a full inquiry into Southport is probably called for. However, beware of what the parameters of that full inquiry are. I bet you there'll be parameters that will keep him relatively safe from too much inquiry, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
but he so cares about the welfare of young people that he's not having a full inquiry into the thousands and thousands of underage victims of the rape gangs. He's not having an inquiry for them. So, you know, him caring about young people, it's intermittent. You know, you never know whether he's on or off about it. Honestly, this man is a total disgrace and utterly useless. There's no doubt about it. I think perhaps John Kennedy, the governor of Louisiana, may be onto something. Maybe, you know, it's the ketamine and it's the bong. We'll play you that clip in a little while. Stay where you are, Isabel, and we'll come back in a minute.
Lord Carlisle was removed from the independent review of Prevent back in 2019 because of concerns over his impartiality.
Oh, yeah.
Interestingly, he does rather seem to have changed his tune.
Does he?
Since last September,
Yeah.
when he said, I think we should get out more information if we possibly can. We've learned from these events when someone is arrested, the police probably need to tell the media who's been arrested and what their background is.
There you
so
go.
perhaps Lord Carlisle should come back on the programme and explain why he's changed his tune.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We're talking about the kind of bien-pensant establishment of this left-leaning country. The police, the CPS, Keir Starmer, his cabinet, all pretty much terrified to have a go at a young man of colour, the son of immigrants, in case they get accused of racism. This guy killed 3 little girls, tried to kill 8 more and 2 more adults, had ricin in his house, had an Al-Qaeda manual. He was an absolute maniac, and yet the police release a nice picture of him as a 12-year-old, an angelic 12-year-old. Why didn't we get a current picture of him? It's because the police, the woke police, wanted us to think better of this monster. He just killed 3 kids. There's no point in putting out a 12-year-old. Oh, look, isn't he cute? Oh,
right.
Oh,
I mean,
it's so ridiculous.
Can you think of any other case of a mass murderer? Because that's what the guy was. It was certainly attempting mass murder, and he achieved far more damage and pain than anyone could possibly imagine. Can you think of any equivalent where the perpetrator of such a crime has had a baby face picture put out? I mean, Myra Hindley, anyone? Ian Brady?
Yeah.
You think of the Moors murderers, you think of the pictures put out of them. Rosemary West, her ghastly husband, can't remember what he was called. We didn't have baby pictures.
Fred. I mean, that's exactly right. It's like, oh, look, here's a picture of Myra Hindley. Yeah, she's the Moors murderess. Oh, look, there she's in her pigtails in her primary scale uniform. Isn't she skipping? Isn't she cute? Absolutely ridiculous. So now let's cut to that. This is the bien-pensant left-leaning establishment, who never ever want to tell the truth about alleged Muslim terrorists, Islamic terrorists. They're always tiptoeing around people of colour, might be accused of racism. Now the truth is less important than us getting accused of racism. Now, we're going to cut to the heart of the matter. A guy called Lord Alex Carlisle, the very epitome of the great and the good, used to be a Lib Dem MP, now potters around the Prevent programme, and was on Mike Graham's breakfast show this morning, and it all got a bit heated. But we're talking about Prevent, which Axel Rudakabana was referred to 3 times, but couldn't get in. So it's harder to get into Oxford University than Prevent. It's a very, very exclusive organisation. I mean, here's this guy going around. He's obsessed with the Rwandan genocide. He's obsessed with mass murder. He actually stated to Prevent to assessors that he'd like to massacre school children. And they said, oh, no, he's all right. We don't need him in the anti-terrorist programme. No. But here's Lord Carlisle, who seems to think Prevent is absolutely wonderful. Take it away, Lord Carlisle.
You have to remember that Prevent is a scheme that depends on cooperation, and I find it very difficult to believe that this perpetrator would have cooperated with Prevent. That may be the reason why he was not admitted to the Prevent programme, which is very successful with many people, but not all.
Well, I would have to say that I would disagree with you on that as well, because Prevent is clearly not fit for purpose. Would you not agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that at all.
What exactly has been good that Prevent has done?
Prevent has done what it says in on the tin.
Well, it hasn't prevented anything, has it? It hasn't prevented young children being killed. No, it hasn't prevented young children from being killed. It hasn't prevented the London Bridge attacker from killing people when he came to Fisherman's Hall. It has failed multiple times to protect the British public. So therefore, the word Prevent is not even a suitable moniker for the organisation.
Can I now answer your question?
Please do.
Or whichever question you want me to answer.
Well, you tell me what successes Prevent has provided us with.
I was about to, but you interrupted me during my first
I'm sorry,
sentence.
you're obviously not used to robust conversations, are you? Well, yeah, because I'm not going to be spoken down to like some kind of child, OK? I don't know who you think you are. Just because you're a lord does not give you the ability to lord it over the rest of the public, OK? So talk to me as an equal, or else you can get lost, frankly.
I thought you were a journalist.
No, I'm a journalist. Yes, I am.
I'm going to answer your question if you'll shut up for a minute.
Go ahead.
Right. Prevent has done a great deal of good. Prevent has prevented large numbers of people from becoming terrorists, but it does not succeed in every case, and you could not expect it to succeed in every case.
Well, there you go, a representative of the great and the good, one of these people who seem to hover around the authorities, organisations like Prevent. He's saying what a great organisation Prevent is. As I said, Isabel, it's very exclusive. It's very difficult to get into. You know, if you go around saying I'm going to murder school children and I'm obsessed with genocide, that doesn't get you in. You've got to do better than that. And of course, it was tremendously successful, the Prevent programme, wasn't it, in preventing that Islamist fanatic Usman Khan killing 2 people on London Bridge a few years back. He'd been in Prevent. I think Mike's got a point. Prevent doesn't prevent anything. It's a waste of time. If it's not going to accept people like Axel Rudakabana into its anti-extremist programme, who the hell is it going to let in?
My jaw was dropping at that interview. That was absolutely brilliant. I'm not sure I'd have been as brave as Mike in telling Lord Carlisle to get lost, but kudos to him because, you know, we're all fed up, aren't we, of kind of mealy-mouthed non-answers. Look, Prevent, its core offer is to prevent, and demonstrably it did not prevent this most heinous of crimes. Therefore, Prevent has catastrophically failed in this case. And why don't all people, just admit that? It's no good sitting there or standing there and say Prevent is brilliant, it's prevented loads of stuff. It didn't prevent this, and this was absolutely dire, and therefore it failed. The problem the government have got, I suppose, is that you can't kind of issue long lists of all the terror attacks that you've prevented. But I think we would need some more evidence to convince us that it is actually an effective programme. My suspicion, and I think we've read about this before, haven't we, is that far too much resource from the Prevent programme is directed at the so-called fringe far right, and not enough is directed at a more broad spectrum of threats that we all face.
Indeed. Well, let's go to break now, and when we come back, we'll discuss more of this situation to do with Axel Rudakabana, and I think we'll probably concentrate on the government's latest deflection technique, which is to get us to obsess on the horror of him being able to buy a knife on Amazon. I mean, it's not great that he can do that, but you can shut that down if you want. He's still going to get a knife, and so will anyone else who wants to get a knife. It's ridiculous. We'll talk about that next. There we are.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, Isabel, I'm still with Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's excellent international editor. Isabel, the good thing about this is the knife problem has been solved because the government has pledged to make it much harder to buy knives online from now on. So no more shopping by people like Axel Rudikabana online on Amazon for knives. So that means that people like him will never be able to get a knife, will they? I mean, it's amazing. There's nothing deflective about the government obsessing on this at all, is there? I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. I'm not praising the fact that kids can buy knives online or from Amazon. That's a bad thing. I suppose if you can cut that back, if you can stop that, well, good. But, you know, go to your kitchen now. In the cutlery drawer, you will find at least 50 murder weapons, just as there would have been in Axel Rudikabana's mother's kitchen on the day he set off for Southport to kill those kids. Furthermore, interestingly, there is one particular harrowing description of the 12 minutes of horror as that little monster ran through that dance hall stabbing people. And witnesses described him, I mean, this may be just a description, you know, in the heat of the moment, but witnesses described him as carrying, and I quote, a kitchen knife. So, I mean, either way, you know, just saying, oh, we're going to crack down, no more online knife sales to kids, it's pointless. Nothing. It doesn't mean anything, does it?
No, completely pathetic. You know, it is actually already a little bit tricky to buy a knife. You've got to do a few things in a supermarket. You've got to be clearly over a certain age, and you know, if you're buying it on Amazon, you've got to be 18 and above and all that. I know this because I tried to buy a set of kitchen knives a while ago, and it was a right old palaver, and the knives ended up getting sent back to Amazon. No one was quite ever able to meet the criteria for receiving the kitchen knives. But that set aside, as you say, every kitchen's got a knife in it. You know, for goodness sake, you know, someone with that murderous intent really going to be stopped because they can't actually get hold of a kitchen knife? Come on. You know, here's another thing, by the way. I understand that Axel Rudikabana was also for a period buying seeds. Now, seeds are what you use to make rice in. Certain type of seeds create that deadly poison. I don't know what seeds he was buying, but unfortunately, they kept on being delivered accidentally to a neighbour's address. And the neighbour has complained about this. Is the government, if this comes out, and if I'm correct and my information isn't wrong, is the government also going to ban people from buying seeds? You know, it's very similar to their policy of smashing the vile criminal gangs.
My government will outlaw gardening. Horticulture will become a major offence.
You can just see it, can't you? What, you now got to show you're 18 when you go in to buy some garden bulbs, you know.
You're old enough to buy those daffodils, mate.
just the kind of daft stuff that they do, isn't it? It's not an answer. It's just a sort of pathetic knee-jerk thing. I even think primary school children would know that that wasn't going to resolve or prevent a situation like this. I mean, ultimately, the tragedy is if it's just the case of someone having crazy mental health problems, and we believe in the case of Axel Rudikabana, there's much more to it than that. And thank goodness he didn't simply plead insanity, and we didn't have that whole nonsense that we've had in other cases. But you're never going to be able to prevent true nutters from doing terrible things. I mean, anyone behind the wheel of a car can cause mass murder if they choose to do so. You're not then going to also ban cars. It just isn't going to be an answer to these awful acts.
Yeah, and Keir Starmer, of course, his favourite word, change. Terrorism has changed. It's changed. Well, he's talking about loners in bedrooms, frustrated young men in their bedrooms. Well, that's not new.
No.
And of course, when he seeks to say that, it's to persuade us that there's not some kind of Islamic plot against Western culture. It's loners in bedrooms who are radicalised. Well, actually, there is a bigger picture than that. So once again, Starmer, in terms of Axel Rudakabana and other terrorists, perpetrators of terrorism, he's trying to downgrade their crime by just saying they're loners, they've got mental health issues. It's undermining the true scale of our problem. The true scale of our problem is we have not, of course, all Islamic culture, but we have a culture. There are Islamic extremists who mean the West harm. And to just say the only perpetrators of terrorism pursuing that cause are young, frustrated men in their bedrooms, loners, is to fail to address the true seriousness of the crisis we confront.
Well, of course, there are Islamic extremists, and they are unfortunately all over the world. And the vast majority of Muslims in our country want nothing to do with them. That represents nothing of their faith. It is a complete warping of those teachings, and in a completely different category to the mainstream Muslim faith. But there's no point in pretending it doesn't exist. It does exist. And a real genuine worry is that some of those who come over on the boats across the channel, who've thrown away their paperwork, may be of this mindset, may be jihadists. I don't think that that's a crazy thing to suggest whatsoever. If you are, your mission is to wage jihad, you can clearly see a route into the UK. And, we know a number of experts have flagged this up as a real threat to our country. We have got to start being a lot more choosy about who we let in, and not simply ushering anyone who comes in on a boat into hotels in our communities and hoping for the best.
And we also should contemplate why it is that Keir Starmer seems so reluctant to talk about the bigger picture here, to talk about the potential threat from Islamic extremists to our culture, to the West, to Britain, to America, to the countries of Europe. Why is he reluctant to talk about this? Why does he try to divert it into a conversation about young loners in their bedrooms with mental health issues? Because if he says there's a bigger picture, it might offend the Muslim community. And guess what? At the next election, he needs the Muslim vote. So I'll leave that hanging in the air. When we come back, we'll have a look at the woke bishop who didn't get the memo in Washington, and also we'll have a look at Senator John Kennedy, no relation, I think. He's the Kennedy who is the senator of Louisiana. Now, he's got some very interesting thoughts about what drives Keir Starmer. That next, stay tuned.
do what Trump is doing, people will get on a plane, take their capital with them, and go to the US. We have no option but to get on that, get with the program, or lose our economy and lose our best people. But I just want to pick up on one thing where you started. I mean, it was absolutely a goosebump moment listening to what President Trump was saying, and indeed listening to his team around him in the various comments they've been making over the last few days.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still with Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, a couple of videos for us to watch. First of all, let's do the woke bishop in Washington who didn't get the memo. This is hilarious. This was yesterday morning. It was the traditional inaugural prayer service at the Washington National Cathedral, presided over by Episcopal Bishop of Washington, Marion Budd. Listen to this and look at the faces on Donald Trump and his entourage as she delivers this lecture, this woke lecture. It's hilarious. Watch this.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives.
She went on to talk about illegal migrants, saying they're not criminals. She went on about them. They're the people who do our gardens and fix our cars. It was very, very sort of patronising. She said they're not criminals. Well, actually, they are. They're illegal migrants. The clue is in illegal. But she lectured them for about 5 minutes. Afterwards, Donald Trump, he tweeted or put it on his Truth thing saying, what was it? The so-called bishop who spoke at the national prayer service on Tuesday morning was a radical left hardline Trump hater. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. She was nasty in tone and not compelling or smart. I agree with him. It was very inappropriate to lecture them. And what is she talking about? There are trans kids who want to kill themselves or something, or fear for their life. What nonsense is she trolling out there?
Completely ridiculous. Doesn't it remind you of the late and not very lamented Archbishop of Canterbury? It's the kind of thing that he would do. A special mention there for Tiffany Trump, that's her with the wavy blonde hair sitting
with the
just
very big hair, yeah.
behind Melania, looking utterly bewildered by these comments. And a special mention for J.D. Vance, who at the trans children thing looks at his wife and basically sort of does a metaphoric eye roll. Completely inappropriate, and I thought Trump's response was hilarious. And, you know, as I was saying on one of our earlier shows today, the best thing we can do for so-called trans children is to stop the nonsense in schools that tells them that they could be confused about whether they're a boy or a girl, and stick with what Trump says, which is that there's just two biological sexes, male and female. That's it, folks.
Under American law now, thank the Lord for that. And I don't know what she's talking about, trans kids fearing for their lives. You know, look, we care about the welfare of everyone. Of course, we want trans kids and, well, if there are trans kids, but lesbians, the LGBT community, we want them to be happy. We want them to feel safe. This isn't about having a go at them, but it is this woke, virtue signalling claptrap. That wasn't about lesbian and trans kids and migrants. That was about her. Aren't I a wonderful person? I care about migrants. I care about trans kids. But you Republican right-wing monster, you don't care. It's that nonsense, that halo polishing nonsense that Trump magnificently chucked into the rubbish bin the day before.
Yeah, I mean, she just basically embarrassed herself, didn't she?
Yeah.
And he just sat there and tolerated it. Look at his face, thinking to himself, yeah, love, but I'm the president now. And you can just put all that in the bin.
Exactly right. And he was asked as he returned to the White House before he got his pen out and started posting what he thought. A reporter shouted at him, "What did you think of the service, Mr. President?" He goes, "What did you think?" He said, "Wasn't too exciting, was it?" Thank you, Bishop Budd, but no thanks. Let's move on to our next amusing American video, and this is the one that you flagged up. I'm glad you did, Isabel. This is the Louisiana governor called John Kennedy. I don't believe he's part of the Kennedy clan, but he's certainly straight talking. He took one look at Keir Starmer's bizarre bid to offload the strategic Chagos Islands to China's friend Mauritius. And like the rest of us went, hey, what's this about? And this was his reaction.
Terry Ruriel need to pick up the phone and call Prime Minister Starmer in the United Kingdom and say to the Prime Minister, Mr. Prime Minister, with all due respect, stop dipping into your ketamine stash. Put down the bomb. We need this military base to combat China. Don't do it. And if the president will do that and the Secretary of State will do that, I believe Mr. Starmer, who tried to ram this through the week before President Biden took office but was stopped, I believe that he will give in.
I believe he's right. I mean, that notwithstanding, that was fantastic. I love that guy. I'm going to get him on my show.
I have a feeling, I don't know this, by the way, but it feels to me as maybe that guy had a couple of drinks with Mr. Farage at some point when Mr. Farage was over in the United States in the last few days. It wasn't that amazing. It was so funny, just the way they talk sometimes over there. And the only thing is about this little idea that maybe our Prime Minister, the only explanation for the uselessness and idiocy of our Prime Minister is that he's actually absolutely off his head on drugs. Unfortunately.
I want to stress we're in no way suggesting that our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is off his head on ketamine and is smoking a bong. That would be an outrageous suggestion, but it was an outrageous it was an outrageous suggestion made hilariously by Senator John Kennedy. And a lot of us, as you quite rightly suggest, Isabel, were going, well, that could explain quite a lot.
Except he's just too boring. Obviously, we don't condone drug taking. I would never do such.
No, of course not, no.
But can you really imagine Keir? I'm hoping tomorrow that the papers will be full of cartoons of Keir Starmer with a massive joint. Just such a leap, a stretch of the imagination, isn't it?
It would serve him right. I mean, let's talk briefly about the Chagos Islands, because in a rare, wise move, if it was indeed a wise move, I'm not quite sure of the details, but it did seem to me that towards the end of last week, there were stories around that stupidly Starmer and his left-wing sidekick, the hopeless Attorney General, the lefty Attorney General Richard Hermer, Lord Hermer, no political experience whatsoever, and it shows, that they were trying to rush through the Chagos deals before Trump came into office. But at the last moment we heard that wisely, if it is true, they decided to wait until Donald took the helm in Washington and let him make a decision about whether or not Britain and indeed America should cede this territory, this very strategic territory in the Pacific Ocean to, is it in the Pacific Ocean or is it the Indian Ocean, in the South Seas, to Mauritius, to China's friend Mauritius. So if Donald has been given the right of veto, I think he will veto it, won't he?
I'm pretty sure he will do. I think and if he does, by the way, that is, I'm going to say like 99% down to the campaigning of reform in general and Nigel Farage in particular. I know how hard Mr. Farage has worked to get this on the radar of the incoming Trump administration. And you can imagine how difficult that was when they were, preparing for power, so many other things on the agenda. And, here's this small British issue about this base. And of course, it does affect the Americans because of their huge military base that we leased to them, Diego Garcia. Yeah. So I know that Nigel worked very, very hard to get the people around Trump worked up about this. And if he manages to get Trump to dismantle this deal, that is on him. He will have saved that bit of our strategic assets, really.
Everybody confused about why Britain has been so desperate to offload this very strategic territory in the South Seas, from which both America and Britain monitor the Middle East, China, the Far East. It is very vital to us. For some reason, Britain has decided we've got to give this back to Mauritius. And the Mauritians go, what do you mean you want to give it back to us? We've never had it. It's 1,400 miles away from the Chagos Islands. They've never had sovereign control of it. So we go, well, all right, then what about if we give you £800,000 a year for 99 years, 9 billion quid? Mauritians, that sounds interesting. So that seems to be where the deal is at. And if you're wondering, like everyone else, why? Why are we doing this? You need to look no further than Lord Richard Hermer, who is a dyed-in-the-wool sixth form socialist hippie, just like Starmer. This is what he says. He said, it's colonialism. It's about anti-imperialism. Britain shouldn't have these territories abroad. We're not an empire anymore. Right, he said, one can't begin to understand the British colonial project without appreciation for how racism impacted almost every element of it. There you have it. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. How old are these people? Like 17 or something?
I mean, hang on a minute. Is this guy so ignorant that he doesn't realise that the greatest imperialists of our day are actually the Chinese? They're just a little bit more subtle about it, but not that subtle about it. They are effectively colonising large swathes of the world with a particular focus on Africa, but also on parts of the Caribbean. And what they do is they build roads and railways and airports there. What does that sound like to you? That sounds like basically taking over a country. They import Chinese populations to those places. They make them vassal states. So what are we doing with this Chagos deal? We're potentially handing back this territory to allies of the Chinese. That's just swapping a guilt for old colonialism to a new colonizer.
Yeah, there is no reason for us to do this whatsoever.
Zero.
Unless you take into account the political opinions of a bunch of superannuated sixth form student socialists like Richard Hermer, who thinks that we're all racist imperialists. And of course Keir Starmer goes along. By the way, he got this job as Attorney General, never been in politics before. Funny enough, he gave a £5,000 donation to the Labour Party before the election, was elevated to the House of Lords so he could become Attorney General. What is he even doing there? He has no idea what he's doing.
I'd never heard of him, honestly. I was like, who? And that's a reflection of our politics, isn't it? That you can just do this. It's all been tremendously shabby. It's reflected so badly on us. It's made this country, the United Kingdom, look like it is a country of diminishing ambition, that we are shrinking, turning in on ourselves, all those things that they said, those anti-Brexiteers, they said of us, those who promoted Brexit, oh, don't be little England. Well, that's just what we've become, are becoming, little England that isn't allowed to have any strategic outposts. I know of several countries that would actually offer us new strategic outposts, new naval bases as we speak. Can you imagine our leaders ever engaging in that?
No, I can't. We're going to talk about net zero next. Thank you very much to Isabel Oakeshott. Back in a minute.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is hour 2 of tonight's Political Asylum. In half an hour, I'll be taking your calls. 0344 499 1000. What do you think about Keir Starmer's cover-up in Southport? It's a cover-up, folks. He's not telling us the truth. So 0344 499 1000. Why did he accuse the rioters of spreading misinformation about terrorism when he knew there was a connection to terrorism in terms of Axel Rudikabana? He knew from day one. You know, he's not being straight with us, this guy. 0344 499 1000. How absurd is it that the government is now focusing on the very important business of making knife sales online very difficult? You know, you can't get from Amazon anymore. Well, you know, the Axel Rudikabanas of this world, they might not be able to get their knives from Amazon. That's not a good thing, don't get me wrong. But they'll go straight to their mum's kitchen, won't they? Where there's 50 murder weapons. This is ridiculous. They're just deflecting from their own utter incompetence, the terrible way they handled this entire situation in the summer after those awful murders, and they continue to handle it badly. There was no reason not to reveal that ricin and an Al-Qaeda manual had been found at Axel Rudikabana's house, unless you wanted to protect him, unless you wanted to lie to the public that it was nothing to do with terrorism, unless you wanted to pretend it's just a sort of loner, a Welsh lad. Here's an angelic picture of him when he was 12, a Welsh lad from Cardiff who moved north. 03444991000. Let me know what you think. Now, let's go back to Donald Trump, and it's not really about Trump. Well, it is about Trump. We're going to talk about how his common sense American energy revolution has exposed the madness, not only of our own resident green lunatic, crazy Ed Miliband, the net zero secretary, but also of his fellow kindred spirit across the pond in America, Al Gore. He's another zealot, a fanatic about this green claptrap. Now, Donald Trump just says, nah, net zero's over, not going to bother anymore. We're going to drill, baby, drill, more oil, more gas, more coal. I'm going to make energy so cheap for Americans, you won't believe it. It looks like fairly soon, because of fracking and drilling and more gas, more oil, more coal, American energy bills are likely to be 5 times less than ours because of Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband is another liar. He's talking rubbish. Now, a guy who's written a brilliant article in The Spectator about all this is the excellent Ross Clark, who joins me now. Thanks for joining me, Ross.
Good evening, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, the statistic that I loved in your article, which was entertaining all the way through, bearing in mind that both that both Ed Miliband, Crazy Ed, and Mad Al over in America both stated after Trump said net zero's over, saying the renewable project, net zero is unstoppable. Well, you reveal that these figures, this is from the International Energy Agency, that worldwide investment in renewables has indeed risen. I mean, it's a bit of a racket. You can make money out of it. But that's gone up from $471 billion in 2021 to $771 billion last year. Pretty impressive. Now let's look at global investment in fossil fuels over the same period. 2021, $963 billion. Last year, 1.16 trillion. So renewables aren't out of the picture, but the idea that they're unstoppable is nonsense, because it looks to me very much as if fossil fuels are winning the race.
Well, I mean, all that Donald Trump is doing is actually what every other country, which most countries with significant oil and gas reserves are doing, which is exploiting those reserves. It's Britain which is the outlier in sort of voluntarily choosing to leave its oil and gas reserves in the ground through Ed Miliband's windfall taxes and refusal to grant new licenses. Most countries around the world are exploiting their oil reserves. They are drilling, baby drilling, if you like, to put it in Trumpian terms. And that applies to, you know, the good guys, as we might say in inverted commas. President Lula in Brazil, who has aspirations to be the world's 4th largest oil producer by the end of the decade. Now, I mean, he's okay for turning up at COP conferences and signing all the documents, saying the right things and saying, you know, we're going to phase out oil and gas. But then he goes home and he boosts his oil and gas industry. The same was true of Justin Trudeau. Turns up at COP conferences, joins in all the platitudes, and then goes home. Canada's oil and gas production is rising. So, you know, all these countries are exploiting their reserves, just as Donald Trump wants to do. And it's true that, you know, throughout the past 15, 20 years, America has unashamedly pursued a policy of national energy security and cheap energy, of which fossil fuels are a very big part. And that's been the case whoever's been in the White House, Democrat or Republican. And Donald Trump is just merely continuing a policy that's been in place since George W. Bush.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Ross, is that world leaders, even the virtue signalers like Justin Trudeau and the new guy in Brazil, whilst they'll say the right things, they're pragmatists. They realise that the people of their country will appreciate reasonable energy prices, so they carry on drill baby drilling. They carry on with their fossil fuel, with gas and oil, even though they'll bang on about their windmills and their solar panels till the cows come home. So they're pragmatists. The kind of leaders that perhaps you want. We have Ed Miliband, who's not a pragmatist. He's an evangelical zealot who is going to make us all poorer. He's going to make us colder. And a lot of experts say that without a shadow of a doubt, if we carry on down his road, his absolute green lunacy road, we'll have blackouts within a couple of years, power cuts, massive power cuts, and at that point this government will find itself in serious trouble.
But that is very likely. I mean, you look at a day like today, wind energy is producing about less than 1% of our electricity. Solar power was producing about 2% during the early afternoon. Of course, it's fallen away to nothing after sunset. But Ed Miliband wants to build an electricity grid that's almost entirely powered by solar and wind. I mean, how do you do it on a day like today? And his answer seems to be, well, we'll keep all the gas plants we've got. We'll keep them, sort of mothballed so we can use them on a day like today. Well, that's going to be fantastically expensive because on the one hand, we're going to have all these gas plants which have to be, they charge high prices when they are in operation because they have to maintain them, keep them maintained for when they are needed. And at the same time, we have vast numbers of wind turbines and solar farms which are going to be producing power which can't be used a lot of the time because the grid won't be able to cope. They'll be producing too much power. And what we do at the moment? We compensate the owners of wind farms when the grid can't accept their energy. Consumers paid £1 billion last year to do that. And it's completely ridiculous. It's completely extremely expensive. And the idea that Ed Miliband's idea it's all going to save us £300 a year is complete fantasy.
Well, our energy costs are already going up. I mean, they're beginning to rocket. So, that's one pledge that hasn't come true. Let's enter the through the looking glass world of Ed Miliband. Now, think about this. This is a guy, while we're going, why is Britain doing this? Why are we so fundamentalist about greenery when we produce less than 1% of the world's carbon emissions, when anything we do here in Britain will make no difference to the ecology of the world whatsoever, because we are such a minor polluter. While we produce less than 1%, China produces 28%. So we go, well, Ed, why are you doing this? It doesn't make any difference. It's just costing us a load of money and not helping save the planet whatsoever. It's very important that we're a world leader, that we show the way so that other countries will follow. How's that working out with America? Are they following us? Because it doesn't look like they are, does it? So there is one of his policies, one of his intentions, completely shot down 2 days ago by Donald Trump. Where in America, net zero is over. Ed Miliband says, net zero is unstoppable. I've got news for you, Ed. Donald Trump just stopped it.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like the Chagos Islands, which you were just talking about a moment ago. It seems the policy of this government is we've got to fleece our own people to make these sort of grand gestures on the international stage, to sort of sackcloth and ashes approach to government. And, I mean, when Britain made this net zero commitment in 2050, and this is a sort of made the policy commitment in 2019 to reach net zero by 2050. The idea was that it was going to inspire all these other countries to follow suit, and some other countries have made sort of set targets to reach net zero by 2050 or other years, but they're not the sort of legally binding targets in most cases that Britain has put itself under. So, if the UK government fails to make progress towards its 2050 target, it will be sued. It can and will be sued by all these environmental organisations, and then it'll no doubt be handing out climate reparations and all the rest. When it comes to, a country like China, if it doesn't sort of meet its 2060 target, Xi Jinping has made it clear that he will not pursue this target at the cost of economic growth. And, if China finds it difficult to get to net zero, it's just going to drop the target. Same in the US, same with most countries around the world. It's just Britain and a handful of other European countries which have decided that this is something that they really are going to sort of force upon their people at any cost.
It's nonsense. So you've got the big polluters are, of course, China, America close behind. You've got Russia, you've got India. Brazil is a big polluter. Even Australia is quite big. None of them are particularly doing anything about net zero whatsoever. If they're doing anything at all, it's mostly lip service. Oh, yeah, we care about the planet. Carry on drilling, carry on mining. That is the attitude of the big polluters. So they're not doing anything. So, can't Keir Starmer see the lunacy of this evangelical madman and the damage he's doing to this country? Ed Miliband, I think, is probably the most dangerous man in this country right now. What is it about his nonsense, his utter, arrant, palpable nonsense that Keir Starmer can't see?
Well, I think once those blackouts begin, and I think we will eventually have severe problem. I mean, it might not be a blackout, but it'll be people being ordered to sort of turn off their appliances at particular times of day because the grid can't cope. Once we get to that situation, I think the debate will change because Ed Miliband's position will become untenable. But can I just make one other point about Donald Trump? And we are becoming, as in Britain, we're becoming more and more reliant upon US gas thanks to our refusal to exploit our own resources.
Fracking, yeah.
And we're now importing US shale gas fracked in the US to Britain to power our power stations and to heat our homes and so on. And thank God that Donald Trump is exploiting his oil and gas reserves, because if he wasn't, we wouldn't have any gas. We wouldn't have enough gas to power our power stations and keep our homes warm. So thanks, Donald, for what you're doing. And
absolutely,
Ed Miliband should be extremely grateful to him.
Yeah, one last point, about fracking. I mean, I know a bit about earthquakes. I used to live in Los Angeles. I was in a massive earthquake back in the 90s. And I know about the threat of earthquakes, and I know where they happen. You become obsessed when you live in California with earthquakes, with seismology. Anyway, so we had that big potential fracking unit, didn't we, up in Lancashire, all ready to go. What were they called? Quadrant or some company like that.
Yes.
All ready to go. This was the Tories, by the way, just ready to go. And then suddenly, no. Oh my God, there's a few grannies saying save the planet outside the plant. Rishi Sunak and the gang and the Tory gang said, oh, we need to close this down because it's going to cause earthquakes in Blackpool. No, it wasn't going to. It never would. What a load of nonsense. But not only did we close the plant down, we poured concrete into all the tunnels to make sure it could never be reopened. What is this insanity in this country? What is that all about?
Yes, well, when it's accused of causing earthquakes, what they actually mean were very, very minor earth tremors, which couldn't even be felt by humans on the surface of the earth. The idea that it's going to sort of cause a sort of earthquake, which devastated San Francisco in 1906 or something, is complete utter fantasy.
Do you know what, Ross?
These are minor tremors, which we get hundreds of them every year anyway, because they're just in the background wherever you live on the earth. You can't escape these sort of minor tremors from time to time. And we killed off, and just like the GM foods that were going to grow us second heads and so on, we closed down a complete industry because out of sort of irrational and exaggerated fears.
Yeah, you know what we need? Donald Trump, with his amazing speech the other day, the end of wokery, the end of net zero, the end of 107 genders. It was a bit like Emperor's New Clothes. It's like somebody came in and said, do you know what? This is all nonsense. And everyone went, you're exactly right. We need a Trump in this country to do the same. And to go back to that story about potential earthquakes in Blackpool, there were slight tremors from the early fracking manoeuvres in the local area. And somebody, a seismologist, said the tremors were the same as you would experience if you dropped a watermelon onto the street. That was the level of the tremors that they said would destroy Blackpool. This is the insanity that grips this country. Hopefully, Donald Trump can bring, well, he's bringing sanity back to America. Hopefully he can bring it back to Britain as well. Ross, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. The excellent Spectator columnist there, Ross Clark, on the lunacy of Ed Miliband. He's going to cost us a fortune. There's no sense to his policies whatsoever. We need someone like Donald Trump to stand up and say net zero is hereby cancelled, because if we don't cancel it, it's going to cost you a fortune, and within 2 years you'll be sitting there in the darkness. You better start buying candles. And as I said to Jeremy Kyle earlier, when the power goes out, governments tend to lose their power. Ted Heath found that out in the 1970s when there were mass power cuts due to industrial disputes, and he had to go to a 3-day week. So whole areas, they didn't have power for days on end, and that meant that government, Ted Heath's government, fell. And if Keir Starmer has got any sense, and I don't think he has, but if he has, he'll take one look at that guy, Ed Miliband, or he'll take another look at him and say, that guy could be the end of me. And if you're watching Keir, you probably aren't. Well, I've got a few things to say to you if you are, but if you're watching, get rid of him, otherwise you're finished. He will finish you, trust me. In a little while, we're going to be taking your calls. Don't forget, the number is 0344 499 1000. But before that, we're going to discuss the migrant crisis, particularly in Italy, where Giorgia Meloni, the Italian leader, seems to have pretty much, she's on course to solve it. No mention of smashing the gangs, funnily enough. And we'll talk also, probably along the same lines, this strange business that police are refusing to record the ethnicity of criminals because they think it might cause charges of racism against them. I'm only sick of this stuff. I'm so sick of it. If somebody calls you racist, you're not. It doesn't really matter, does it? Some people call me racist all the time. I'm not a racist. You can call me that if you like. It doesn't dictate my activities, doesn't dictate what I do in my life. Yet the cops, oh my God, somebody might call us racist. Let's stop recording the ethnicity of criminals, just in case people call us racists. I'm sick of it, aren't you? 0344 499 1000. That next, stay tuned.
in his opposition to so-called gender-affirming care for children, he is protecting kids who will probably turn out to be gay or lesbian when they grow up.
Yeah.
There are a lot of statistics to support
huge amount of evidence that is often the case. Exactly. A lot of vulnerable children with autism and the like. Yeah, I thought that was particularly strange. But also, trans people apparently living in fear.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We're going to talk about the migrant crisis really around Europe and indeed the continued sort of middle-class hand-wringing that I think makes our problems even worse. Before we get to this somewhat poignantly shocking scenes today in Germany this morning about quarter to midday, 11:45 a.m. An Afghan migrant, an asylum seeker, armed with a knife, ambushed a nursery group, and a boy aged 2 and a man aged 41 were stabbed to death. This was in the Bavarian town of Aschaffenburg in Germany. That's this morning. So this is a 28-year-old man from Afghanistan, was arrested close to the crime scene. He's thought to be an asylum seeker, armed with a knife, which just brings into sharp focus why we have to be careful about the people we let into our countries. Don't forget, back in August, poor Germany suffered a similar kind of attack from that lunatic who ran round the square in that town in Germany, and I think, if I remember rightly, killed 3 people, slashed the throats of about 11 more, and the authorities spent about 6 days before they finally revealed that he was an asylum seeker. All the people saying, oh, he's a man of Middle Eastern appearance. The police saying, oh, we haven't got any clear descriptions. Terrified to say this guy was Middle Eastern. Was an asylum seeker, which is what he was, from Syria, I do believe. With that as the bedrock for this piece, let's go over to CDF Fellow at the New Culture Forum, Philip Kisley. Thanks for joining us again, Philip.
Hi, Kevin. Great to see you again.
Well, look, I want to talk about Giorgia Meloni in just a second. I just mentioned the horror in Germany today, and a story has emerged over the weekend that the ethnicity of criminals here in Britain is not being revealed by police forces because they fear they may be charged or may be accused of racism. And it turns out that more than a quarter of our child sex offence cases do not include that key detail of the perpetrator, what ethnicity they are, because the police in their middle-class hand-wringing way are terrified that somebody might say, oh, that's racist. We've got to stop this nonsense, haven't we? We've got to confront the truth.
Yeah, we're in a situation where the police are terrified of the criminals, or probably more accurately, they're terrified of any pushback they will get from blue-haired upper middle-class people called Ponsonby Smythe on Twitter. There's a real problem, and it's willful blindness, and we know how devastating this can be. It puts me in mind of something that happened a long time ago. I'll just mention it very quickly. A couple of weeks ago, I saw a photograph, a composite photograph, lots of viewers might have seen it, of a composite photograph of mugshots of gang rapists, grooming gang people. And you might have seen it, and it was like a slap in the face. They are all one demographic. There was maybe 1 or 2 people who weren't, but they were all one demographic, as we Pakistani heritage men. And it took me back to the Yorkshire Ripper case, where police saw photograph after photograph of a dark-haired man with a beard, and they interviewed Peter Sutcliffe 9 times and let him go every time, because in their minds they were looking for someone else. They were looking for a letter hoaxer. They were blind to the truth, and what we are here is blind to the truth, and the consequences of 50 years ago are the same as now. People will die, people will get raped, people hurt, because we cannot confront the truth, or the establishment and the police cannot confront the truth, and that is people are coming over here who want to kill us, want to harm us, and who are waging war on us.
Absolutely. And this reluctance of the police to record the ethnicity of criminals, and also, by the way, it's an official Home Office policy not to tell us the ethnic breakdown of our prisoners, our foreign prisoners, and what offences they commit. We're interested to know whether or not some of our foreign friends who end up in prison, many of them migrants, asylum seekers, whether or not they have a propensity to a particular type of crime, particularly sex crimes, because it seems that they probably do. It has just emerged in Sweden that 2/3 of that Scandinavian country's convicted rapists are migrants. 2/3 of Sweden's convicted rapists are migrants. Now, that is an important statistic that a nation, a population, citizens have the right to know. We have 10,000 foreign prisoners out of our 90,000 or so prisoners in this country. 10,000, big percentage. We don't know what their ethnicity is, what connection their ethnicity might have to their crimes, because I think it's the same reason, because our authorities are worried that if we do that, it might seem a bit racist. Again, we are not confronting the truth. We are more worried about our middle-class angst about being called Islamophobic or racist than we are about confronting a very important truth.
Yeah, and Sweden is a really good example, because 40 or 50 years ago, again, Sweden was probably one of the most safest places on earth, and now the crime rate is just appalling, and the antisocial behaviour and all sorts of terrible things that are just happening in the streets. So the plane has crashed into the mountain there. They are beyond catastrophe, and now they are looking at things like repatriation, remigration, and all of those things. And we will come to that. You know, we are not learning the lessons of our neighbours. We are not learning. We are not seeing what's going on. Well, some of us are, but the establishment and the political class aren't. We're not seeing what's going on there, and we are not bearing in mind the safety of our own people. And the crime is one thing, and safety, of course, is of paramount importance. You only have to walk through central London. I walk through central London a couple of times a week to work, and I feel intimidated. There's an atmosphere of suppressed violence in the air, but it's cost as well. Okay, so if we're talking about immigration and we're talking about low-paid workers, we're not even talking about illegal immigration here. We're talking about low-paid workers. We know that the cost to the taxpayer of each one of them is over £150,000 when they get to pensionable age. Okay, every single one of these immigrants costs the taxpayer £150,000 a lifetime. It's just unsustainable, and that doesn't take into account the illegal immigrants who are coming across in boats, of course. And I've got a stat here. In June 2024, 31,500 people arrived in boats in 6 months. It's just utterly crazy. And all we have is politicians saying we are going to do something, we're going to sort this out, and of course they never do, and the numbers rise and rise and rise. And what we have in Italy is a very sensible transaction.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Giorgia Meloni, the Italian leader, who was actually invited to the inauguration in Washington, pointedly, I think our Prime Minister was not. She is successfully stemming the tide of migrant arrivals there. They've still got a big problem, but in 2023, 157,000 migrants crossed the Mediterranean from northern Africa to Italy. She's got that influx down this past year by 59% to 66,000, and it's falling. How did she do it? No nonsense about smashing the gangs, evil people, smugglers, none of that. She talked sensibly to Libya, Tunisia, gave them a lot of money, and just said, I'll make it worth your while if you stop those migrants ever getting on boats. And they've done it. They've done it. And she's also, it's not just cash. It's been described as soft diplomacy, but apparently it's quite hardline diplomacy. If you don't play the game, we'll make life very difficult for you. So you can do it one of two ways. I can give you millions and millions and millions of euros to help you, or I can make it very difficult for you if you don't cooperate. So they've taken the money, and they've also taken an offer of friendship in terms of their cooperation, and it's working. Now, I understand we have a much more difficult problem here. You know, you can hardly go to, well, we've been to France, we've tried the money thing, that didn't work, gave them £500 million, didn't work, they're not bothering really to stop any migrants getting onto the boats. But what Georgia has done is taken the circumstances of her country and realistically confronted the migrant crisis. What have we done? Nothing. We've got no deterrent, and we've got this idiot Starmer and Cooper banging on about smash the people gangs. Well, you can smash the gangs till the cows come home. As long as the migrants are coming, there will always be gangs. So they're not in any way taking on board the reality of our migrant crisis, and thus it is doomed to continue and get worse.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to get exponentially worse over the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, there's a solution here, and it should be tied up with aid. You know, yes, we will give aid to certain countries in exchange for a guarantee that their population will not land on our borders, and if that population does land on our borders, then or even if we think they are, you know, if we have reasonable grounds to suspect that these people come from that country, then that aid will diminish or disappear. That's what we should be doing. It's realpolitik. It's sensible. It's dealing with human nature, and these places need money. Okay, let's give them money, but in return, we want something else. This is about our safety, and this is about our economy. It's very simple. It's transactional.
Indeed. Listen, Philip, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Philip Kisley there, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. What do you think about that? Let me know. Give me a call. The police are refusing to record the ethnicity of criminals. Now, you need these statistics to work out whether or not certain nationalities have a propensity towards certain crimes. As I just said, in Sweden, it has just emerged that 1/3, 1 in 3 of their convicted rapists are all migrants, all foreigners. So, you know, we are not given these statistics. The Home Office won't give them out. And yet, I think those statistics could make a very important contribution to public safety. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Let's go to break, and when we come back, we'll take a call or two, maybe read a couple of messages. So stick around.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Let's go straight to the phones. I'll read some more messages out later on in the show. We're taking more calls in about 45 minutes, just 50 minutes actually, about 20 past 9. So that's about, I'll get it right in a minute, folks. So about 40 minutes time. I'll be taking calls again, 03444991000. I'll read up some of the messages you've been kind enough to send me in, and you sent a lot tonight. We've got a lot of calls as well. So let's go straight to the calls now and talk to Danny in London. Hello, Danny.
Hi, how you doing? You all right?
I'm good. Do you want to talk about Southport? What would you like to say?
Basically, I think that people were angry because they were treated like children. Mm-hmm. They were, the truth was obviously apparent to the government, and they said nothing, and
well, they were shot down. I mean, look, the rioters, nobody's condoning the riots, by the way. Nobody's condoning attacking mosques, throwing bricks at the cops. Nobody, I'm not siding with the rioters. But what they were saying, they were rushing around saying, and this wasn't just in Southport, this was in cities all across the country, where a tidal wave of fury erupted in the wake of those horrific killings by Axel Rudikabana in the Southport dance hall. What they were saying was that we think this was a migrant, this was an asylum seeker. Well, it wasn't an asylum seeker. They were wrong about that. It was the son of migrants, but they also said this is terrorism. This was a terrorist attack. And the government, Starmer, said absolutely not. You're spreading misinformation, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to chuck you all in jail in about 3 days flat. The Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, came right out and said it. Any suggestion of terrorism is fake news, as she would put it. Well, it wasn't, was it?
Well, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, we all know there were clues and there was information obviously being leaked by the police and everything, and Nigel Farage apparently got his information from Andrew Tate, which is a bit weird.
What? I don't think it was that. No. Nigel Farage would not have. If Nigel Farage got his information from Andrew Tate, he would not have gone public with it. Nigel Farage quite clearly got his information from. Andrew Tate is not a legitimate source of information.
No, I totally understand, but Nigel Farage gave his argument that the reason he posted something was because he saw it at Andrew Tate, and that's on an interview.
He didn't but that's not. Look, Nigel Farage would not go, oh, Andrew Tate said it, so I'll go public with it. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. You saying that Nigel Farage heard that Andrew Tate 100%. Said it?
I will send you the link to talkTV.
That's not. That doesn't mean it's the source of his information, Danny. Well, it doesn't go like that. It doesn't go like that. Serious politicians don't go public with something Andrew Tate said.
Well, serious politicians wouldn't do what Keir Starmer did.
I kind of take that point.
It's all a game. It's all a game.
Well, I don't think he treated it as a game. I just think he treated it all wrong. He accused the rioters. I'm not backing the rioters, by the way. No, but he accused the rioters of spreading misinformation. It was him and the police and the CPS who were spreading misinformation by slapping down any suggestion there was a connection to terrorism. Well, there was a connection to terrorism. They weren't telling the truth.
Well, yes, but at the end of the day, they class everyone as far right. I'm a Sikh. I'm brown. Mm-hmm. And I was very, very appalled at what happened in Southport. But also, I don't understand why it was far right to be angry.
I couldn't agree with you more, Danny. I absolutely.
Actually, wait, sorry.
I totally agree with you.
Three were murdered, but there's another 10 who were attempted. They're going to live with that for the rest of their lives.
And by the way, eight of those 10 were kids. 8 of those 10, 8 of those who he attempted to murder were little kids. Many of them, some of them, severely wounded and still suffering to this moment. So the anger that swept across the country, in my view, was utterly.
At the end of the day, if the government weren't so focused on the secondary issue, we could solve this. If we were in America, we would have the right to bear arms, we'd have the right to defend ourselves, etc., etc., etc. And that's
I'm not sure how that would have helped the situation. I'm not
because
sure.
At the end of the day, it will make sure that nobody kills kids, nobody rapes kids.
Well, of course, that absolutely is that's the great thing about the right to bear arms in America. Kids never get killed, do they? That's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, exactly.
That's absolute rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. The right to bear arms does not mean kids don't get murdered. But the right to bear arms is America's right. You don't have a right to bear arms here. The right to bear arms would not have saved those kids in the Southport dance hall. But some of the points with you, I agree, Danny. So thank you very much for the call, Danny, in London there. Going to go to break. Next, we'll talk to Professor Carol Sakura, who's made a very good point about how the NHS wastes money, and he works in the NHS, so he knows what he's talking about. That next, stay tuned. And what will happen as well is that tension will only increase, because the problem with the net zero plan that Ed Miliband has got is that he has admitted it's going to cost us all an absolute fortune. I mean, he said the other day when he was at Select Committee, well, there'll probably never be a time when heat pumps are cheaper than a gas boiler. So why on earth would anybody ever replace the gas boiler, which is perfectly good, with a more expensive version of a heating device, which will also cost more money in the long term, because electricity prices are going up and up and up as a result of this profligate government.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm going to mention this just by way of passing. President Donald Trump has ordered that all American government staff working on diversity, equity and inclusion DEI schemes will be now put on immediate paid administrative leave with a view to getting rid of all of them. Now, I'm not against diversity. I think the principles of diversity, equality and inclusion are good. Everybody should deserve a fair break, regardless of race, creed or colour. So fine, but I think many sensible people would accept that the DEI industry is out of control. It is getting ridiculous. People, fire chiefs in Los Angeles prioritising diversity over putting out fires. Insanity. Now, my next guest was a voice of sanity during the dark madness of the COVID era. He is a consultant oncologist at the NHS, Professor Karol Sikora. Let's get him on board now and then we'll run him through an excellent tweet that he put out today. Welcome, Karol.
Good evening, Kevin.
Well, this is what you tweeted today. You included an advert, a job advert, vacancy available. Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion for NHS North East London. The salary for this esteemed position is £80,025 to £91,336. So if you qualify, you might earn as much as nearly £91,500. The minimum you'll earn is £80,000. So good work if you can get it. You tweeted this while citing this advert. We're told the NHS is underfunded. If that is the case, why is over £80,000 being wasted on this diversity role? If it were up to me, every penny spent on these job schemes would be diverted to frontline staff. I think most sensible people would agree. We certainly would, Karol. Let's just bear in mind that the NHS altogether has 800 diversity officers, and that costs £40 million a year. For 40 million quid, you could get an awful lot of doctors and an awful lot of nurses, couldn't you?
Absolutely. I mean, it has got ridiculous. I mean, it's come out of nowhere. For the last 10 years, every doctor has to be appraised, and every doctor every year has to do mandatory training. And one of the mandatory training packages is on DEI, diversity, equality and inclusion. We have the most diverse workforce in the world in the NHS. Just go into any hospital and look at the staff. It's colour, creed, everything. It's diverse. What are these people doing? Not only are they getting paid extremely well, as you say, equally to a junior consultant, for example, often without any graduate degree or any expertise whatsoever, they cause trouble for people. They cause work for people. They make you fill forms in. It's unbelievable. Why are we tolerating this? I really think Trump did the right thing. Just get rid of these people tomorrow. Why not?
It's wonderful.
We can't do that here, by the way, so that people can rest assured that won't happen quite in the same way. But that's the approach to take.
But in the NHS, we mustn't be too hard on the new Health Secretary Wes Streeting yet. But he's the latest lamb to the slaughter, saying, I'll sort this out, I'll reform the NHS, and he's another one of these guys. He's doing nothing about this sort of nonsense. He's doing nothing about, as I say, £40 million on 800 diversity officers. You're telling me that money couldn't be better spent in a health service? I don't know, maybe on qualified health professionals. You're telling me that the NHS really needs 3,500 unmedically qualified middle managers on more than £100,000 a year? When is he going to do something about all of this nonsense? The NHS doesn't need more money. It needs to spend the money it has much more wisely.
Completely correct, Kevin. It's a bureaucracy that's got away with real murder in terms of bureaucratic mindset. And what we've got to do is stop it. Streeting came to power, fantastic, great statement. The NHS is broke. We can fix it. It's not totally broke. We can fix the thing. Okay, we've got to have reform. So he points an old minister from many years ago, a Labour minister, Darcy, to produce a report. And then what happens? Nothing. We're going to reform it. So what does reform look like? Very light on detail what the reform actually looks like. Reform could be all sorts of things. It could involve charging patients. It could involve changing the way in which referral patterns work, changing the way in which primary care relates to secondary care. These are all points you could reform. So far, and we're 6 months in, we've heard nothing. And the system is getting worse. The waiting times are getting worse. And the DEI people are there and they're making waves. They're trying to change things. If you had a nice job for 90,000 a year, you'd want to show that you were doing something. But what are you going to do? I don't see it. No one can see what they're doing.
But someone like yourself doing important work, treating patients with cancer, you're saying that a lot of your time has to be taken up filling forms to prove that you're properly diverse and your staff are diverse and so on and so forth. So in other words, this diversity drive gets in the way of treating patients.
I mean, for example, a nice old lady came to see me in the clinic and she was almost in tears because she had to fill a form to identify what gender she was. You know, in the old days it was man or woman. Now she was given 10 genders on the form to fill, including girl, boy, boy, girl, demigirl. I mean, I couldn't explain it to her. I said, my dear, just have a cup of tea and don't worry about it. Just put lady. And of course the boy and the girl, or the male and female, was sort of way down the list. All the other bizarros are at the top of the list. It's unbelievable what's going on.
Yeah, it really is. And just to reiterate, I mean, Wes Streeting, he's got to get to grips with this. You know, people like me, we scream this from the rooftops all the time. People say, oh, you're sensationalist, rabble-rousers. But, you know, is it rabble-rousing? Is it sensationalist to say, couldn't 40 million quid be better spent than on diversity officers in a health service? Do you really need 3,500 middle managers earning six-figure salaries or often much more? Is that rabble-rousing, or is it just a sort of hollow cry of common sense? Why are people like me, and indeed you, Carol, why are we dismissed by people like Wes Streeting as, oh, you know, this isn't important? It is important.
Completely. And I just don't understand how we've got to allow it to happen. It's partly because the service is completely free. We all appreciate it. I mean, the technical quality of medical care in the UK is superb, and people come to the UK to get it, both from the NHS illegally and also to the private sector. So the quality of care you can get at all professional levels is excellent here. The problem is access. And so from the start, getting to see your GP, getting the diagnostic, the scans, the biopsies, and then getting into the system is a struggle for many people. And instead, we have this bureaucracy that is just wasting money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, do you have... I mean, I fear... You know, I wish Wes Streeting all the best, but you know this. How many health secretaries have you been through? It must be a few now. You know, they come and they go. Every single one of them will reform it, will fix the NHS, and then pretty soon, just as we're seeing Wes Streeting right now, they start fiddling around the edges, saying things like, oh, there's too many unnecessary appointments. We'll get to grips with that. Well, that hardly cuts to the heart of the matter, does it? Once again, so do you fear, because I do, that Wes Streeting will go the way of all health secretaries, a disillusioned man who failed in his mission?
The two routes out for a health secretary: to be fired and in disgrace, like a few people in the past, or to be promoted. And I suspect Streeting will be promoted because he's obviously an able politician. I've no doubt about that. But, it's a completely impossible task if you structure it without reform. And if you can't describe what reform we want to put in place, it can't be done.
Carol, it's really good to talk to you again, and you are a lone voice of sanity in a world of madness. Thank you very much. Professor Carol Sakura, consultant oncologist there with the NHS. I think he made his feelings very clear. The NHS is in massive trouble, and West Streeting isn't going to fix it. It's already sadly clear. There you are. Now, next up, we're going to be talking about the charity boss who earns £5 million a year. Your donation straight into his pocket. Great, isn't it? Stay where you are.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about charities. It's always been a bit of a bugbear of mine. You know, the bosses of charities, they go, oh, you know, because they're running big organisations, you know, they have to earn competitive salaries. You know, so you have bosses of charities getting like £500,000 a year, £400,000 a year. I mean, so I donate my money to a charity and loads of it goes into the bulging boss, the bulging pockets of the boss who runs it. That doesn't seem right to me. I'm not saying they should do their quite important jobs for £20 a week, but these massive salaries, they seem all wrong to me. So over the past 5 years, there has been a 35.7% increase in charities paying their chief executives over £400,000 a year. So the 400 grand a year salaries in the wonderful world of charity are rocketing, more and more of them every year. There's a charity called the Mary Stopes charity. It's a charity that promotes reproductive choices. A guy called, the boss of that is called Simon Cook. He earned £430,000. This was an obscene sub condemned by the Charity Commission. The Wellcome Trust, that's another charity, and that's for health and life sciences, wherever they are, pays 20 of its employees more than £400,000. So if you donate your money to the Wellcome Trust, that will in part go to the 20 employees who earn more than £400,000 a year. The Wellcome Trust Chief Investment Officer, and this is the humdinger, he's the Chief Investment Officer, so he's not actually the boss, but he's clearly, you know, investing the money, you know, making cash. You know, I'm not decrying that. Good. Guess how much he makes? He makes 5 million quid a year. 5 million quid a year. Oxfam, meanwhile, today was accused of weaponising history by claiming that Britain owes India £52 trillion in reparations. Tell you what, Oxfam, why don't you go and find something better to do than that kind of arrant nonsense? Oh yeah, okay, let's get the checkbook out. Turns out we owe India 52 trillion quid. Better pay it. It's a ridiculous waste of time. That's a waste of my money. If I donate to Oxfam, you're going to spend your time coming up with this rubbish. Come on, come on. By the way, Oxfam, I'm going to give it some credit now. They got criticised some years ago for the giant salaries they were paying a lot of their staff. And in fact, the boss of Oxfam now only earns something like a relatively low £125,000 a year. Now, that's a huge international organisation, so I wouldn't moan about that salary. But £5 million a year for somebody who's working for a charity is basically taking your money and stuffing his pockets full of it. No, in fact, come on. Let's talk to social and political commentator. He's been away too long, James Melville. Welcome back, James.
Hi, Kevin, you well?
I'm very, very good. I'm going to get you a bit on Ed Miliband in a little while because I know net zero and energy policies are your speciality. But I wanted to get your take on this. These super salaries of the charity bosses are obscene, aren't they? I mean, paying 20 executives on a single charity over £400,000 a year. Somebody called a chief investment officer earning 5 million quid a year. This is your money, my money. You know, you give it, you put your money in the collection box or whatever, and you know, you expect it's going to the good causes that these charities campaign for. But on many of them, it's mainly going into the pockets of the people who work there. It's all wrong, isn't it?
It is just charity for their own cause. I mean, the problem with this, it might dissuade a lot of people to spend their hard-earned money for a lot of very good causes. They'll wonder, where exactly is that money going to? It's not just charities. I mean, it seems to be happening across other aspects in terms of public spend, taxpayer spend as well. I mean, look at local authorities and some of the effectively public sector fat cat salaries that are going on there, you know, with our council tax money. And then you could argue this at various positions in government. You wonder what they're doing in terms of return on investment as well. But going back to the charities, I think there has to be an element of transparency about where the money is spent. But I don't want to get all Marxist about this. Of course, you've got to have leaders in organisations that get paid a fair whack, but not that sort of money, because the problem with that is ultimately, because people will be reading this, and ultimately the charities will suffer from this, and the causes will suffer because people will be reluctant at a very difficult time during a cost of living crisis to hand over their hard-earned cash if they think that effectively the chief exec or some sort of director are earning north of 7 figures. It's wrong. And ultimately, there has to be more transparency and accountability with the charities to ensure that there's public spend confidence, and the public, rightly so, in a difficult time, deserve that understanding and confidence to make sure that their hard-earned money goes to the right place.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in November, you know, and in October, where in the run-up to, of course, Poppy Day, you know, Memorial Sunday and all that, when we all chuck in a few quid for our poppies, a very good cause. Royal British Legion organises that excellent fundraising effort every single year. But we discovered here at Talk that the Royal British Legion was spending quite a lot of money on diversity. You know, now, again, we've just done an item on diversity. You know, the amount of money the NHS wastes on it. How many other organisations waste fortunes on diversity? I suppose that's their business. But a charity, you know, and we got sort of lambasted. Well, you're making people not donate, not give for their give to the charity appeal, the poppy appeal. So we're saying, well, don't take people's money and waste it on diversity. And if you're going to do that, as you suggest, James, be honest about it. Say, when you give us your £5 or whatever it is for your poppy, about £1.50 of it will go to diversity. And a lot of people said, well, I'm not going to buy a poppy this year. And I don't blame them. And I think we were right to reveal that. And to the people who donate to charities, who out of the goodness of their heart give charities their money, have a right to know how that money's going to be spent.
Completely. I mean, the vast majority of people are spending their money for the cause, not for the cause of lining the pockets of a charity fat cat. It's as simple as that. Of course, people need to be paid in these organisations. You know, you've got to be realistic about it. But it's got to be fair. It's got to be accountable, because ultimately the public spend on charities, which is a huge sector, and at a difficult time. I mean, we're going through this ongoing Mobius loop of a cost of living crisis, where people are struggling to make a choice between heat or eat. And so people are still going out there and giving their money to charities for people who are in an even worse situation than that. It's a difficult time. And if they see, and actually it's right to point out this, because if you do end up with more transparency and some fairer salaries, then it'll clean it up. And then more people will actually donate. And it's our job to point out these stories, because the public at a difficult time are getting fleeced all over the place, in particular by governments with, you know, the highest tax burden since 1948. But if they're getting fleeced by charities that are paying fat cats far too much, and there's a high percentage of that total take of revenue that's going to individuals in the charity and not to the actual cause, then the public absolutely have every right to know that, and then possibly decide to spend their money elsewhere with other charities that aren't behaving like this.
Absolutely. And let's talk a bit about these people who are taking the 400 grand or the 430, or in one case, the extraordinary sum of £5 million.
We're on the wrong job, Kevin.
What do the... what, I mean, you know, where's their charitable spirit? I mean, you know, if I, you know, I'm not known for my sort of moral superiority, but I think even I might lose a bit of sleep if I was taking £400,000 from a charity, you know, that people donated to, thinking that somehow or other, I don't know, they're helping the donkeys or they're helping the starving people of Africa or whatever. You know, what about these people? Where's their charitable instinct? They shouldn't be taking these huge salaries.
Yeah, completely, because the whole point of a charity is to help those in need. Almost every single form of charity is that. That's the very nature of the word charity. You know, there's individuals who are giving their money to people who are in a worse situation than them. And so therefore the leaders within those charities, you would like to think are there for the right reasons, because they care deeply about the people who they're trying to help within their charity. Yeah, if they're trousering north of 100, you know, 300, 400,000 or seven figures or whatever, then where is the moral accountability on that? I'm not saying that, of course, you know, they should be doing it for free, and of course they should be well paid, but the difference between well paid and actually abusing effectively what the social contract is between the person who gives the money to the charity and where the charity spends its money on the cause. And that is the problem. And I think it's important to raise this issue, because ultimately charities only survive, a lot of them are very good causes, but they only survive because of the well-being and the good behaviour and the altruistic support of the punters out there. And in a difficult time, not just with charities, but with also public sector as well, and government, every bit of finance needs to be scrutinised. Because ultimately, whether it's a charitable donation or whether it's our tax spend, we have the right, because we're the ones spending the money, we have the right to know where that money is going.
Yeah, so you'll never get a sort of collector going, put it, please, for the charity. By the way, when you put your quid in there, or your £5, we do pay 20 of our executives more than £400,000 a year. Hello, they wouldn't get any money, would they? Yeah, I think it's a scandal. I think we need to look at this. Listen, before you go, though, James, we covered the story of Crazy Ed Miliband earlier. I mean, first of all, there are two things I want to ask you about. I spoke to Ross Clark about this, who wrote a great article in the Spectator about it. So Ed Miliband has today, in response to Donald Trump basically saying no more net zero, and he goes, sorry, Donald, but net zero is unstoppable. Yeah, Ed, except Donald just stopped it. So there's one glaring nonsensity from our great net zero secretary. But here's the other one. This is the one I want to ask you about. So, you know, you and I have discussed this many times. Why do these virtue-signalling British politicians condemn us to being colder and poorer, all these restrictions, high energy prices, windmills, solar panels, when we know that nothing this country can do will make any difference, because we don't really pollute the world at all. We produce less than 1% of the world's carbon emissions. So we go to Ed, why are you doing this? Well, it's very important that we are a world leader, and by these policies we show the way and other countries will follow. How's that going, Ed, in terms of America? So his policy is nonsense, you know. But, you know, Xi Jinping in Beijing, oh my God, have you seen everything that Britain's doing about green rail? Maybe I should change all of China's energy policies. It's just juvenile. It's ridiculous. And Donald Trump just exposed it for the fantasy world claptrap that it is.
Oh, completely. I mean, if you look at total emissions, I mean, China accounts for more than the developed world put together. And here we are.
28%, 28%.
And here we are, you know, it always feels like the government, on many issues, they're grandstanding, because they like to show off at COP and at Davos and all those jamborees of great virtue, when actually all they are is jamborees of hypocrisy. I mean, you see how many private jets are in Davos at the moment in their motorcades, where they strut around saying they're going to save the planet. I mean, it's ridiculous. And Miliband's part of this. I mean, Miliband and Starmer, they're never in the country. They're always trotting off somewhere else, just talking about, you know, how they're great global leaders and, you know, world leaders in net zero. Ultimately, net zero will only do one thing: make them feel better on the world stage. But it will destroy our economy. It will massively risk our energy supply. It's already been proven. We can't rely on what they're doing. It's also taking apart large tracts of prime agricultural land, where Ed Miliband is plastering solar panels against community objections in many cases on an enormous scale. There's one in Norfolk that's north of 4,000 acres. That's ridiculous. And then you have an argument about the hypocrisy about what a lot of these materials are made from, in terms of wind turbines and also in terms of electric vehicles and where the materials come from. A lot of those materials come from, guess where? China, or child slaves in Congo. The whole thing is utterly ridiculous. I think a lot of the world are beginning to distance themselves from it, because they see what's happening to their economy. The Germans are distancing, they've gone back to coal. Trump's doing Trump things, which is not a surprise. And meanwhile, we're left with Britain, with these cranks who are in charge simply because they want to strut around on the global stage, acting like they're the sort of the big I am, but with a complete disregard for what the function and form is in the UK economy and also our energy supply. If we want to do something for energy in this system, in this country, join it up with all the components. We're surrounded by oil and gas. So why don't we actually do that instead of decommissioning new sites in the North Sea, which is costing lots of jobs, destroying aspects of our manufacturing industry, for the alternative the slavish worshipping on the altar of net zero, which ultimately is complete crass logic.
Yeah, and why don't we do that, James? I'll explain it to you. It's because our net zero secretary is a raving lunatic. That's why. It's as simple as that. Good to have you back on the show, James. We'll get you back on again very soon. James Melville there, social and political commentator. Charity Fat Cats, Head Zero Brains, Ed Miliband, Net Zero Nutter. Your thoughts? I mean, this guy, I tell you, within 2 years, the lights are going to go out. It might even be sooner. He is driving this country towards power cut city, power outages all over the country. And when the people lose their power, the government who presided over that also lose their power. They will be voted out of power. The people do not put up with no power. And this idiot, this zealot, this evangelical deranged man, Ed Miliband, is going to plunge us into darkness. Trust me. This is insane, folks. It's insane. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. We'll go to break now. When we come back, I'll read some of your messages and we'll get to the phones all the way till 10 o'clock. So we've got plenty of time. 0344 499 1000. Just to remind you, at around about 5 to 10, Petri Hoskin will be in to let you know what she's got lined up for your entertainment from 10 p.m. until 1 a.m. Lots still to come, though, on this show. Stay right where you are. Get on the phone, 0344 499 1000. Let me know what you think about Keir's cover-up. He says he's not covering up. It's another cover-up. He's covering up the fact he did cover up in Southport. I mean, what's he take us for? Fools? 0344 499 1000. Get on the phone. It's good to talk on Talk. Back in a mo.
And what will happen as well is that tension will only increase, because the problem with the net zero plan that Ed Miliband has got is that he has admitted it's going to cost us all an absolute fortune. I mean, he said the other day when he was at Select Committee, well, there'll probably never be a time when heat pumps are cheaper than a gas boiler. So why on earth would anybody ever replace the gas boiler, which is perfectly good, with a more expensive version of a heating device, which will also cost more money in the long term, because electricity prices are going up and up and up as a result of this profligate government.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We'll go to the phones in a minute. I'll tell you what, Dawn has sent me a message. Please play the clip of the US governor talking about Starmer again. That was so funny. It's not a US governor, Dawn. It's a senator called John Kennedy. No relation to the Kennedy clan. And just for you, Dawn, we'll play it again. Take it away, John Kennedy.
Terry Rundell need to pick up the phone and call Prime Minister Starmer in the United Kingdom and say to the Prime Minister, Mr. Prime Minister, with all due respect, stop dipping into your ketamine stash. Put down the bomb. We need this military base to combat China. Don't do it.
You go. I love the with all due respect bit. John Kennedy, take a bow, Mr. Kennedy. Great speech, great speech. And nobody is suggesting, of course, that the Prime Minister takes ketamine or smokes bongs. That would be an outrageous suggestion. But very funny indeed. Here we go. This is, what have we got here? West Streeting. This is from Chalky in Market Drayton. He says West Streeting is a loony lefty goon. He couldn't run a phone box. I can't wait for the next by-election. I wonder how many we'll get because the Labour are trying to close down the local elections as much as they can. This is from it says love from Bradford. The Second Amendment is there for citizens to defend themselves from everything, including democide. Cutting winter fuel payments to the elderly in the UK is classed as democide, in my opinion. So he's saying that we should have the right to bear arms against the slashing of the winter fuel allowance. Interesting idea. And what we got? This is from JT. Have a guess how much the NHS costs every day. He says, I'll have to look this up, but I don't doubt it. £500 million every day. That's what JT says. We'll look that up, but it doesn't sound out of the realms of possibilities to me. Leslie says, why is the position paid for rather than a doctor or a nurse? That's my point. And that was Carol Sikora's point. They're advertising for a diversity officer who might, diversity chief, who might earn as much as £91,000 a year, between 80 and £91,000 a year. And as Carol pointed out, and I did too, that could pay for maybe 3 nurses, maybe more. It could pay for doctors, you know, front line medical staff. Don't spend £40 million on 800 diversity officers. It's ridiculous. And I'm just hearing the £500 million every day that the NHS costs is an accurate figure. I didn't know that. £500,000 a day. I mean, I'm laughing. If you didn't laugh, you'd cry. You really would. Here's one. There's not a name on it, but it's interesting. I live in Southport, and you all seem to be missing the fact that it all kicked off because local people knew. This is really interesting. Not a name on it, but thank you, whoever sent this. He or she says, I live in Southport, and you all seem to be missing the fact that this all kicked off, that's the riots, because local people knew who this man was. He had threatened all of his neighbours, being kicked out of all local schools. His name was known in Southport. It was no secret. That is interesting. That is interesting. The local community in Southport perhaps knew a lot more than the rest of us. It would make sense. They obviously maybe also picked up about what was going on, what was being said, what happened in that dance floor, all stuff we didn't know. And after that, the riots broke out. Not accusing local people of that, of course, but I wonder. I bet they did know more than most of us. So, interesting point. This is from Terry in Slough. Hi, Kev. I'm 75, and this is the worst Prime Minister I've seen in my lifetime, and I have seen some terrible ones. Terry in Slough, I'm with you all the way there. I've seen a few myself. This is interesting. Again, no name on this, but it's understandable. I'm a police officer in Police Scotland. I can promise you we document all ethnicities when we record crimes. The system is also very easily auditable. They are lying when they say it isn't recorded. Well, that's in Scotland, mate. I mean, this is a story. This is documented. You know, of course they're not lying. They don't document it. We know the syndrome. And one from Ernie here before I go to the phones. Hi, Kev. We need to use more fossil fuels rapidly to earn enough to pay top scientists to come up with new ideas to save the planet, because no country other than us are going to stop using fossil fuels. We've got to put our trust in science. To an extent, I agree with you, Ernie, sorry. I'm not necessarily all this trust the scientists. Got a lot of that during the COVID crisis, didn't we? So I'm slightly circumspect. The experts, yeah, thanks very much. Right, let's quickly get a call in before we go to a break, and then the rest of the time we'll just chat on the phone, shall we? Gary in Poole. Hi, Gary. What do you got?
Hi, Kevin. Just enjoyed Mr. John Kennedy.
Yeah, anyway, he's brilliant, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and your guest earlier saying, looking forward to seeing what the newspapers are going to have on the front cover tomorrow.
I think the Daily Star might have a bit of fun with that. You know, I'm not expecting it necessarily on the front page of the Times, but it's a very funny story. You want to talk about net zero anyway, Gary?
I'm from Zambia, and also spent my working career in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And back in 2008 and 2009, WWF, the Department of the Minister of Minerals and Energy in South Africa, organised a round table. It was the trade unions. I was there representing business, WWF and all that, to talk about sustainability and coal, fossil fuel stations and whatever. I lived in the heart of the coal mining industry in South Africa and the power generation.
Yeah.
And it was decided then that we've got it in the ground, use it. Now, I'm an environmentalist, but I'm not running around just stop oil and whatever. I take more of a responsible approach to environmentalism. And the decision was taken that going to go fossil fuels, carry on with them. The new power stations that have gone up, the one is Madipwe and the other one is Kusile. One of them is going to, I can't remember which one. I think
what kind of power stations are they, Gary? Are they
coal
fossil fuel? Okay, yeah.
Yes, fossil fuel, yeah. And the one is going to be, Kusile, I think, will be the fourth largest in the world.
Right. So in other words, what you're saying is in Zambia, in South Africa, where you were, they have a sensible, pragmatic policy. We've got this evangelical zealot who just wants to get rid of all, non-renewable power. So we'll be stuck with just wind and sun, and that's not going to power the country.
It's not going to do a thing. And the other thing that was decided at these meetings and whatever is that any old power station, coal-fired power station that gets taken out of commission can be turned into a renewable type solar. Look at some form of renewable energy coming from it.
Yeah.
And then also the other thing that was decided was that yes, we're not going to carry on fossil mining and coal-fired power stations are not going to carry on the way they used to.
Yeah.
They're going to look for new technologies to put into the scrubbers and all that to absorb some more of the carbon.
So, in other words, a sensible, pragmatic approach to the fact that you just can't say, right, from now on it's just sun and wind. You can't do that, even in a place like South Africa where there is a lot more sunshine than we have here. It's absolute nonsense. I'm afraid we are in the hands of a dangerous fanatic. Ed Miliband does not live in the common sense world. Gary, interesting point. I've got to move on, but thank you for calling, and please call again. Gary in Poole there. Going to go to break now, and when we come back, we'll talk to Laura Jane in Hampshire. Stay where you are, Laura Jane. Stay tuned. Back in a mo.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's go straight back to the phones. Now, I'm going to speak to Laura Jane in Hampshire. Hello, Laura Jane. Now, I've got a note here saying first branch meeting went well. If I remember rightly, you formed is it Reform? Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you formed a branch of Reform UK in Hampshire, yes?
Yeah, Southampton, North and Rumsey. And we had our meeting last night. We elected all the officials, to the correct format. Our new chairman is Paul Barrett, who during the last election, in a sort of 24-hour turnaround, took on the Reform MP candidacy. And Ben Habib came down twice to support him. And in 6 weeks, he managed to make Reform come in third. In fact, we beat Labour by 1,000 votes. But the bad news is, which was given to us at the meeting last night, is that our Test Valley Council has cancelled the local elections for May.
So you've had your elections. Oh my God, this is to do with. So what are they claiming, that there's going to be a redrawing of the boundaries, and therefore it wouldn't make sense to have an election now until the new boundaries are in place? But what they really mean is Labour are terrified of having a local election because they'll lose, right?
Well, the excuse is the devolved tiddly push that Angela Rayner wants to bring in. And hopefully, there's a petition which everyone will sign. And so we're going to still get ready as if the May elections are going ahead, because we don't want to be cancelled. but so success on one hand, but obviously our council elections have been cancelled. But I have another point to your Southport cover-up.
Yeah, go on.
I wondered if we shouldn't dig more deeply into Starmer's other reason, apart from needing to keep the Muslim vote on side. By the way, you remember he laid flowers and then he went straight to a mosque afterwards when he went to visit Southport. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he seems to be, and I use the word seems to be, involved in the family coming over from Rwanda. The family. Well,
they look. He's denying that. There's been talk that somehow or other he was connected with Axel Rudikabana's father getting residency here in Britain. The prime minister has denied this. He says this is not true.
Of course he has.
But we have to be careful. We've got no evidence.
We have to be very careful.
Yeah, we have no evidence that this happened.
No.
I'm the last man to defend Keir Starmer, but we haven't got any evidence that he in any way had anything to do with Axel Rudikabana's father. So, we're going to have to sort of park that one, really.
Yeah. Okay, and then one other small point, it's a large point, is that the other day the founder of Greenpeace said on College Green outside Parliament, founder of Greenpeace, fairly well-known organisation, he said, we need CO2. It is a fabrication that it must be banned. Without it, as humanity will die. So the exact opposite to what Mr. Miliband is saying. We need CO2.
Yeah, well, basically, in terms of Ed Miliband, the exact opposite of everything he says is what the rest of us call the truth. He talks gobbledygook, absolute gobbledygook. And as I said earlier, he's the most dangerous man in Britain. And within 2 years, with this zealot, with this lunatic at the helm of our energy policies, get used to it. We are going to be plunged into darkness. This guy is mad. He's mad. And Donald Trump has exposed the lunacy of his net zero zealotry by just saying no more net zero. Therefore, you get cheaper energy, you're all warmer, you have better heating systems. We don't need this crap. We really don't. Laura Jane, good to hear your meeting got off to a good start, and keep campaigning to get that local election to happen. It's outrageous that they're going to cancel these elections just because they're not going to do well. That's Laura Jane, who has just formed the new chapter, if you like, of Reform UK down there in Hampshire. We've got, I think we've got some WhatsApp voice calls, yes. WhatsApp voice note times. We'll go back to the phones in just a little while. First up, it's Jonathan on Southport.
Hi, Kevin. This is Jonathan here. The public perception now of Keir Starmer is that he is trying to cover up this Southport massacre. He knew all the facts from the outset, and he hid it. He hid them from the British public, especially the fact that this monster in Southport was manufacturing ricin. Surely, as a Prime Minister, he had a duty of care to protect the residents of Southport from possible deadly poisoning.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jonathan. We were subjected to a cover-up. We still are. He's not telling us the truth. He decided, because the fevered atmosphere was causing riots, he decided not to tell us, to make sure the public didn't know that there may be a terrorist element to what happened in that dance hall. He decided to keep that quiet, the fact that Axel Rudikabana had an Al-Qaeda manual and ricin in his home. He decided to keep that quiet. If he just said, look, it was because I wanted to stop the riots, we'd have some sympathy. Instead, he's hiding behind some old legal claptrap that doesn't hold water. He's lying to us. Good WhatsApp voice note, Jonathan. The next one is from Claire. That's about Keir Starmer. Take it away, Claire.
Evening, Kevin. Claire from the Wirral here. The sooner people in this country realise that Starmer is a closet Corbynite, the better. He has an agenda and we don't count in it. The only purpose we have is to keep putting money into the coffers of their Marxist government for their favoured ones that they are covering up for, from child rape to murder and slaughter on our streets. Oh, how progressive. It's like going back to the Dark Ages. all in the name of multiculturalism. God help us.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Very good point. The secret left-wingism, the extremism of Keir Starmer is a worry, and his acolytes. I mean, this lot are extreme socialists with a programme to take as much money out of your pockets and to take as much money out of industry, out of private businesses as humanly possible, and in that left-wing way, give the money to the public sector, to civil servants, to people who are on the government's payroll. That is a way to destroy an economy. That destroys an economy. Think about it. You know, you're taking money out of the money makers, the people who create money, create wealth, and you're giving it to people who sponge off the government. That isn't going to work, is it? Right, next up, let's get the WhatsApp voice note of Linda. She too wants to talk about Southport. Let's hear what she has to say.
Hi Kevin, Linda in London here. So, like you, I'm not against making things harder for people, for getting hold of knives, things like that. But you're absolutely right. There is no way that this is going to, if somebody is intent on causing harm and, well, let's be honest, killing people, they're going to find that weapon somewhere. And also, in this specific case, if he was hell-bent on doing this, which it looks like he was stopped from doing something similar about a week before, then he was 18 in a couple of days after he did this. So he'd have legally been able to order or buy the knife anyway. So whilst I'm not against making it harder for people to get hold of knives, I just think it's yet again the government and our previous government not dealing with the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is why have we got so many young men in this country that are hell-bent on violence. And when they are referred to services like the police, like Prevent, like social services, nothing's done. That's what we need to be talking about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Linda. We really do. And Axel Rudiger-Kapana, I believe, is tomorrow due to be sentenced. Now, a judge at an early stage said, right, we don't have to treat this guy as a kid, as an underage minor, because he committed these crimes, I think it was within 1 week of his 18th birthday. You can name him. We'll treat him like an adult. I hope that tomorrow they treat him like an adult too, and he doesn't get some kind of sentence, oh, it's only a kid, so, you know, we'll give him 20 years or something. No, he has to get life. He has to get life for murder. But look, think about his crime. He has to get, in my view, a whole life sentence, the biggest, the worst sentence we can give anyone, like Lucy Letby got. In other words, you go to jail, you will never, ever get out. Whole life. We throw away the key. Because if he doesn't, you try and tell me a worse crime than going into a kid's dance hall and killing little girls, 3 little girls, stabbing them to death, trying to stab to death 8 more and a couple of adults. You know, you tell me a worse crime than that. If that doesn't warrant a whole life sentence, then I don't know what the hell does. One last WhatsApp voice note. It's Dave, and he wants to talk about hate preachers. Take it away, Dave.
Good evening, Kevin. It's time we shut down these preachers in mosques, etc., giving out hate, nothing but hate. Stop these hate marches, because that's all they are. And the people who, these Islamic extremists, they're already here in our country. It's another attack has happened today in Germany at a kindergarten. They attack the weakest in our society to drive terrorism. Good show, mate.
Well done, Dave. Hate preachers or hate marches, we have to be careful about. I'm against banning these marches because I believe in freedom. You know, whatever your cause, no matter how much I hate it, you should be able, within the law, to protest your cause, to campaign, to demonstrate. That's my view. The problem with these so-called hate marches, these pro-Palestinian marches that snake through our cities with monotonous regularity every weekend, particularly here in London, there was a huge one this past weekend, is they're not policed properly. all the people, the thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people on these marches, loads of them just breaking the law. You know, from the river to the sea, you know, just put, you know, jihad, you know, you're not allowed to promote terrorists, Hamas, Hezbollah. You're not allowed to call for the destruction of Jews. You're not allowed to call for the destruction of the Jewish state. And yet, in these marches, it's full of people doing that, and the police just stand there looking on, saying, we've got to keep the peace. Well, if you're not going to police them, if you're not going to enforce the law, then maybe we can't have these marches. We should have the marches, but they should be policed and the law should be enforced. What we've got now is coppers who are a bit scared to enforce the law in case it causes trouble. Well, that's no good, is it? You know, the coppers have to uphold the law. They can't stand by and look at the law being broken, because if they arrest anybody, it might disturb the peace. That's just all wrong. So that's my view on hate marches. Let's go back to break now. We'll play a few adverts, and when we come back, more of your calls.
Know how much wind energy we're generating at the moment? As we speak, 0.7% of our energy is coming from wind turbines.
Oh, come on, let's have a round of applause for that. Well done.
2%
is that of our energy or of our electricity?
Of our electricity. And,
which is only 20% of our energy needs.
Yes, that's right. And 2% is coming from solar power.
How?
Now,
I mean, I'm looking out there. How?
4 p.m, the sun's going to come down. Energy requirements are going to go up because it's going to get colder.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Here's a great story, maybe for Petri Hoskin. I don't know if they'll be able to get hold of the details in time, but certainly a great one for Mike Graham tomorrow morning. Don't miss his show. The Morning Glory Breakfast Spectacular starts at 6 a.m. Donald Trump that guy, this whirlwind of activity. I told you earlier, brilliant story. He's just laid off every single diversity officer who works for the American government on fully paid leave at the moment, but with a view to getting rid of them. So he's just sent them all home. Don't need you. No more diversity in our government, my government. Go home. And they're setting about getting rid of them. Now he's announced, you're going to love this, you know, the Kennedy files about the assassination of JFK back in 1963. They've always remained in close secrecy, shrouded in secrecy. Never shall the public know the details. Donald Trump's releasing them tonight. Tonight. The Kennedy files are being released tonight. This could be sensational. This could be sensational. The American papers in particular, the American media are going to go crazy about this, and I think we will too. Donald Trump, oh my God, oh my God. Right, let's go back to your calls. Let's talk to Martin in Cambridge. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Kevin. Yeah, I've just been thinking about the Starmer government. And it's almost like a theocracy. And what I mean by that is the net zero, multiculturalism, and all the equality stuff and all that. It's almost like a religion. And anybody who disagrees with it is a blasphemer. I mean, they are so radical in this belief that they are right that anybody who goes against it is wrong, and the only way they can win the argument is by hurling abuse at people.
Exactly right. I mean, yeah, and they're losing. They're losing. Trump, you, me, millions, of what you might call, I don't mind saying, normal people, ordinary people. We are sick of being lectured to, looked down on by these virtue-signalling, halo-polishing politicians who just want to make our lives hell. They fleece us. They make our lives misery so they can look good on the world stage. Oh, look, net zero, aren't we wonderful? Peace, yeah, give Ukraine money and all this. Well, we've had enough of it. And Donald Trump has come in and spoken for the people, just said, I've had enough of it too, and in America, it stops. It's over.
I mean, absolutely right. I mean, any commonsensical person would use the oil that we have, use the resources we've got, get that money, then you would build nuclear power stations, and then you would actually create wealth in the country. That's how you pay for these things. It's a gradual process. But these people are so ideological, they are blinded by the truth. And it is just absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, and all the grooming gang thing and all the rest of it, they cannot believe that that multiculturalism has failed. So therefore, they will stop any argument, they will stop debate, they will stop anything, because they cannot accept.
Yeah, think about this.
Wrong.
Very good point, Martin. Think about this. Right, let's just create an imaginary scene back in just straight after the Southport murders. The details start to come out. The police, Keir Starmer, the CPS, all of the authorities. Ooh, who did this then? Oh, it's this boy, this teenager of colour, son of Rwandan parents, immigrant parents. Oh my God. Let's put out a very nice picture of him when he was a kid. Oh, we can't make people think too badly of this guy. He's a person of colour. He's the son of immigrants. Oh, let's make him look nice. He just killed 3 kids.
Absolutely.
I don't give a damn what picture you put out. I'm never going to think too well of that guy. It's ridiculous. It's this bien pensant middle-class angst. Oh, we mustn't be seen as racists. Let the rape gangs get on with it, because if we arrest these Pakistani Muslim men who are raping vulnerable white girls in our cities, all 40, 50 cities across the land, if we try and stop them, if we arrest them, we might be accused of racism and Islamophobia. This madness has got to stop. It's got to stop.
Absolutely. And the reason why there isn't a inquiry is because those 50 councils are invariably all Labour.
Yeah, Labour,
right?
yeah. Labour MPs,
Yeah.
Labour
They're
councils.
talking hundreds of councillors. And then we've talked about before, the police chiefs get their position because they're in a Labour stronghold. And the whole thing goes around. They are protecting their arses, and the truth has to come out.
Yeah,
right? And they fear it.
Well,
they really do fear it.
I think the truth does have a habit of coming out fast and furious. So hopefully it will. Martin, great call. Thank you for ringing. Call me again very quickly. Last call, I think, because Petri will be in a second. It's James in Hertfordshire. Hello, James. You want to talk about crazy Ed? Yeah.
I do indeed. Yeah, love show, Kev. Massive.
Thanks, James. Thanks.
I'm big mates with Quirky. I try.
Are you big mates with Quirky?
Yeah,
Why? I mean, for God's sake, no. I'm just joking. So, what would you like to say about Crazy Ed Miliband?
Kevin, is the man on a personal vendetta to punish the UK because we didn't vote for him?
Could be one explanation.
Do you remember his crazy headstone that he came?
Yeah.
The man looked an absolute prat, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, he is an absolute prat, that's why.
He is an absolute... He was humiliated. Worst election result for Labour since 1987. Cameron spanked him, and that's saying
they're
something.
saying something, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, yeah, but he's a mad evangelist, and his policies, his net zero lunacy, makes no sense whatsoever. And trust me, within 2 years, we are going into darkness. There will be power cuts, mass power cuts, unless Keir Starmer, in a miracle, suddenly realises this guy is mad. This guy is not good for this country. And if it could be explained to Keir Starmer, if you're the Prime Minister that plunges the country into darkness, you'll find out what Ted Heath found out back in the 70s when he plunged the country into darkness due to industrial disputes, 3-day weeks and all that. And he was soon voted out of power. So that's the score. James, I've got to move on because the show's about to end, but it was very, very